Hello, everyone. My name is Anita Levy. I'm a singer-songwriter, creative artist, and owner of a major music academy. And I'm very excited to introduce a new member on board. His name is John Levy. And actually, he is the reason why I got into music and songwriting. So, before I ask him any questions, I just wanted to say that he is the reason I am doing music today and songwriting because I think probably ever since I was probably the first day, maybe when I was born, he's been listening and playing music to me. Um, Also, I mean, I would grow up with him playing music all the time. His room was right next to mine. He was, as I said, when I was in my crib, he was playing to me. So that was my education. And But I think one of the turning points for me was probably in high school when I think was it senior projects? Was that what it was called?
I think it was, yeah, was it your senior project or
Yeah,
mine?
I think I remember
Yeah.
I was doing one for songwriting, or I think it was songwriting. Um,
Mm.
I actually remember being called into the counselor's office in high school because I didn't have a career chosen. And he was telling me, like, okay, so what are your universities you'll apply to? What will you do? And I thought, well, I like doing music, and basically I followed everything you did. I did everything, copied you. And so I thought, well, if I'm allowed to do music, that'll be great. So I remember sitting down with you, and you helped me write
Mm.
my first song. So for me, that was
Wow.
the point where I thought, wow, I can actually do
Yeah.
this. And it really encouraged me, and I feel like it started from there. So today I have, yes, my brother, John Levy. I'd like to ask you questions, but how about we start off
It-
with introducing yourself and how you got into songwriting?
yeah. Oh, well, I'm so honored. That's such a beautiful story. I think like obviously I know that music has always been a part of my life and your life, but just to hear you articulate it that way is it's so honoring. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so music for me is very special. And I think, yeah, just to say, like, obviously you remember it differently than I do because of the impact that it's had on you, but had a different impact on me. So music for me, we'll go into that. Um, yeah, I think it was obviously a natural thing, and just picked it up as soon as I possibly could, and always gravitated towards toy toy instruments. And
Mm.
our dad played trumpet and had a guitar, so I would drag the guitar around when I was 3 years old and knock it into doors. And even though it didn't make any musical sense, I would just be like, yeah, 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 or hit stuff. So it's always been a big part of it. And then I think around 8 years old is when I formally started actually learning the guitar. And I wrote my first song after my first week of playing guitar because like I know three chords, I could write a song now. So we wrote this song, me and my friend, and we called it "Bye Bye Ayumi." And this is actually, I'll see if I can do it again, because there was a girl in our class who was leaving and going to a different school, and so I probably learned like I think I probably learned, yeah, maybe G, C, and D. And we were like, bye bye, we will miss you a lot. Bye bye, we will miss you a lot. And it's probably like that. But because I had only just started learning the guitar, it was more like, bye bye, Yumi. And I said to the guy who was singing, my friend Chris, I said, okay, you keep singing and hold out the note. Like, Ayumi, I'll miss you a lot.
Wow.
La, bye, bye. You mean so? I just instantly knew that it was a tool, yeah, to communicate ideas and communicate messages. And so the first thing we wrote was for a friend. And I think, ironically, rather than playing it on an acoustic guitar, I played it on a Flying V electric guitar because we had one of those for some reason. Um, so that started really early. Learned three chords, and I was like, let's do this. And then yeah, just learned more music. Started learning like Beatles songs, James Taylor songs, and then just kept with it. So much so that yeah, when I got to high school and sat down with my high school counselor. It was the same thing. It's like, well, what are you gonna do? I'm like, I'm gonna do music. It's like, and I'm
You
gonna
get
apply
to-
to one school and that's it. Yeah. And it was like,
Okay.
are you sure you don't want to have like a backup plan? I was like, no, I'm going to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and I'm applying. And if I don't get into there, I'm gonna try again. And so it was like that was the only option. So I went there and studied music production and engineering, and also continued my studies on the guitar. So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of the the history there.
That's so interesting. Okay, I didn't know about your first. I didn't know that you were also called into the counselor's office. But it's interesting you
Yeah,
say
yeah, yeah, yeah.
about when you're 8 years old, you remember that song. But I guess you were probably always writing because I remember finding back in Japan at our home a cassette tape of your music, and I could hear you playing. Was it guitar or I don't know other things as well, and you were singing, and
Yeah.
I was in the background ruining it. Sorry, but I guess you do. You
No,
remember?
background vocals.
Do you have any memory of those like creating and that young?
I remember the feeling. I remember the sensation, like because we had a cassette recorder, and I think at first it was probably just a single cassette recorder, and just be able to record your voice and hear it back was fascinating. And I think that's still something that like I have a daughter who's 3, and like that's something as well. It's just like, oh my goodness, you're just fascinated with that technology because it's amazing, and to have access to it. So I remember that sensation and that feeling of being in that room with the recorder and singing songs or making up little speeches and then hearing them back was just such a fascinating thing. And but I don't think it was until I hadn't, yeah, till I kind of married it with music in a more formal way and understood the structure of a song, because that was, I think that was the thing that unlocked it. Was I learned a song, I was like, oh, okay, well, a song is 3 chords. Now I can build a structure within that. Yeah, so I think that kind of maybe was the thing that unlocked it for me.
Hmm, very interesting. Is there any other that's an interesting thing about because of that technology, um, like little
Mm.
recorder, because of that. So along the way up until now, is there any other kind of device that also shaped your songwriting?
Yeah, I think like it just maybe not. So I think that, yeah, being able to record my voice and hear it back on a tape recorder, that was amazing. And then I got like a dual set recorder, so I could record guitar on this tape and then take it out and put it on this tape, and then put this tape on there, and then put bass on top of it, and then take that tape and flip it over. And so it was just like building upon that. So it was just amplifying. And then the next step was, my guitar teacher told me about Pro Tools and said you could get, at the time, and I think you still can, you can download like a free version of it. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I could have 8 tracks on the computer. I was like, wow, this is, so it just kept opening it up, and then just discovering all those tools that kind of, yeah, amplify the ability to songwrite or take or just write music in general. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because I hear a lot of stories about that. It just started young with some people that they had some kind of device or technology, either like a guitar pedal or something that made them, just experimenting a lot with that.
Yeah.
And then later on getting into it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, yeah, was just recording. I was just like, I was fascinated with that, so
Mm,
that's why I went to go on and work and study it.
Great. So when you were 8 years old, then when you had your first song, what what was your dream as a young child? And then how has that dream changed over the years?
mm. I think it started out just as a pure love and a pure attraction to music, and also, yeah, just watching our dad like do music in church. It was like, oh wow, that's like just that again. I kind of think like the way that you said, you're a musician because you were looking up to me. It's like I was looking up to him
Mhm.
as well. So there's an element of that. But then I think once I discovered the songs, that was like something that kind of opened up, I loved performing in front of people. So that was really, really special. But then I think once I kind of discovered more that you could be writing and expressing yourself through song, that was really interesting. But I think the penny really dropped for me when I went to, I'd already been to a concert like when I was 3 or 4, and I was bouncing up and down on dad's lap, apparently, just like, this is amazing. Like, but the one that I distinctly remember was when I was 13. I went to an Eric Clapton concert in Japan, and that's where we grew up. It's not like we went to Japan for a concert and then came back. It was very extravagant, but at the time, actually, it was very significant, because I think like the ticket was like probably the equivalent of 120, 150 bucks. Like, it was expensive. It was quite a thing to go to a concert. And so I went with my friend, and the interesting thing was that I'd already been studying and learning to play Eric Clapton songs. So I've been playing them at 13 years old. But then when I went and saw him play his songs live, and I saw this man like walk out, he's just a regular guy wearing jeans and a t-shirt, and he came out with an acoustic guitar, and he did one song with an acoustic guitar and sang, and this filled the whole arena. And then his band came out, and they played like kind of a jazz bossa type of song. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And everyone's taking solos, and it was just this electric feeling. I was just mesmerized, like, this is amazing. And then when he played, I'd only heard the acoustic version of the song Layla, which is very chill, very relaxed, and beautiful. But then he started to play this electric version as like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and I was like, what song is this? And I thought it was a song that I knew, and I was like, this sounds more amazing than on the record. But then I realized it was Layla, and I was like, what? Like, so that really opened it up for me, of thinking, oh wow, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to, yeah, play soft, beautiful songs like Tears in Heaven or Crossroads, with just an acoustic guitar, but then also have a band come on and play this completely other different style, and then break into a rock song that's actually also an acoustic song. And so when I saw that, I was like, that's what I want to do. Like, I saw it and I was like, oh, that's what I'm meant to do. And then it was just a journey of, yeah, just pursuing that in my own time, and writing and practicing and writing and practicing, and then formally choosing to study that and getting a band together in Boston. It was an amazing band, and living out and experimenting with that, and experiencing that feeling of playing with 5 other musicians that are amazing and can improvise on the spot, and you're like, whoa, this, and they're playing my songs, this is really cool. But then, and then so, but like the development between that and now is, yeah, finding the balance as well to be a working musician. So I've I've been living in Darwin for 3 years, and the Gold Coast before that for 2 years. And during that time, yeah, I've been doing like pub gigs, and so playing in pubs and learning the Aussie classics that people like to listen to, and then doing weddings as well. So I think it's been such an interesting development to like use that as a space to continue honing my craft as a performer, but also, yeah, to be able to pay the bills and support my family, which has been such a blessing to be able to do that. And then it does, I think, like the more that begins to develop momentum, it creates more space to be able to, yeah, set time aside to go, okay, I'm going to write on this day, or I'm going to, now I actually have the luxury to say, okay, Fridays are my writing day, and that's going to be a time to do that. And then just kind of, yeah, create some space for that, and begin to, yeah, feed resources of time and money and recording into that, so that it can develop at the rate it needs to. So, yeah.
Okay, so you're in Darwin at the moment.
Yes.
And let's go back a little bit, and maybe in case people don't quite understand. So you are my brother. We have a little bit of a different accent.
Yes.
So explain your
Yeah.
upbringing. Yeah, explain your upbringing. Where were you born?
Yeah. So, yeah, born and raised in Kyoto, Japan. and went to an international school with three other boys who were half American, half Japanese. So I started to pick up their accent. So I had a very Aussie Kiwi, almost British accent growing up, and there's some recordings of hearing that. But then that just began to morph over time, and then by the time I finished high school and went to the States, I probably already sounded like an American. And so I went to Boston and studied there for 4 years, then went to Los Angeles and lived there for 2 years, and then back to Japan for a few years, and then over to Australia in like 2016, 2015, kind of for the first time to actually live.
Okay. So, yes, in Boston. So, as I was saying before, I followed you. I copied everything you did. I followed in your footsteps, and I
We went to
wanted.
Boston to Brazil.
Yeah. So I thought, okay, well, if I can do music, well, Jonathan's gone to Berklee. Do you think I can do that? I couldn't think for myself because I just thought I just like creating. I just like doing my crafts. I don't know
Mm.
exactly what to do. So I thought, okay, I'll study music as well. And so I ended up going to Brazil, and then you were in Boston. So I think maybe that's also where the accents got a little different.
Yeah.
But explain. So you were saying our father was, a big part, a big role in your love for music. What about when you got to Boston and you mentioned people can check out your website? Um, you can explain more about that later. But
Mm.
who were some of your role models or inspiration, and where was another turning point when you went to Berklee, because you're surrounded by a lot of great musicians, and
Mm.
explain a bit about those people.
Yeah, I think the biggest influences while I was at Berklee were my fellow peers.
Mm,
There were key teachers, and I'll list off a few of them in a second. But when I immediately think of it, I think of the biggest influences were like, and I think a lot of people have this question of should I pursue? I've heard a lot of people ask. So John Mayer went to Berklee for 3 semesters, I think, and I've heard a lot of people ask him, should I go to Berklee? Should I go to music school? And I've often thought about that question. I think, okay, what did I get out of music school?
mm,
And I think honestly, the thing I got out of it was my friends, was my peers. And that's the biggest thing I learned, was because you ended up with some of the best musicians in the world. So like you have the best musicians from Spain, you have the best musicians from Germany, from different parts of the States and from Japan, and they all come to this one place to hone their craft together. And yeah, they're sitting under amazing teachers and learning amazing things, but a lot of them are already amazing musicians. And each of those musicians comes with their own flavor and their own approach. So I was on the dorm floor with, and this is how I met so many of my friends. So like one of the guys that was on my dorm floor had a full ride scholarship, and he was a saxophone player, and he was touring with Marcus Miller already. And it was like, so you're listening to him practice down in the basement. You're like, whoa, I've never heard that before. And then he would rip out this, and you're like, whoa. And you just walk down the hallways and you'd hear so much music. And then the person that I was rooming with, he was an amazing, his name's Ben Natty, and he's from New Hampshire in the States. But he was an amazing like electric guitarist of like Steve Vai, Greg Howe, I forget this other guy's name, Frank. His name's something else, Frank, but they call him Frank the Tank, I think. But he played with like Chick Corea. And so I'm learning all this new music that I'd never heard before. And I'm learning these techniques as well that he can do. And maybe I can't necessarily do, but I can then adapt. I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting. And then I learned about Soul Live, this funk band. And then I'm learning about um, there's a piano player who's my friend, Josh Faubert, who's ended up playing in my band, and we recorded together. And he'd done a bunch of work in the gospel community. So he had played with Israel Houghton, and all these guys. And I'm like, I've never heard of that. So I'm learning all this music. And then my friend Matt Musty, who's a drummer, he introduced me to a lot of, I'm trying to think of, like we bonded over just soul groove, like John Mayer, Steve Jordan music. And he had a whole background of kind of this, um, yeah, like American, oh, like a good example is oh, I forget the name. So many artists. But anyway, I was just learning so much of this stuff. And he's gone on, which is really cool. He's now touring with Train. And so like we would bond over Train and these other bands while we're there. And now he's playing with them and he's working with them and he's working with all these amazing musicians, and the same with so many of my other friends. So it was from those guys, and there's another guy, Jorge, who was a bass player who played some crazy fusion stuff, and he played some of my stuff for a little while. And so like I was like introduced to his style of music. So that was probably the biggest thing that like began to develop me. And at that time you just sit with guys and go like, what's in your iTunes library? And you just look at all this stuff and it's like, wow. Because in that day and age, you know, we're getting CDs and burning them onto our hard drives. And that was the big thing, was like, oh, what's on your iTunes library? It's like, wow, you got like 20,000 songs. What do you have? And then that's also how I met Jackie Barnes, who is the drummer for Jimmy Barnes, his son. He came and studied as well. And that was a whole nother thing. Like I'd never understood Australian music. And all of a sudden, like on my dorm floor is Jackie. And he's like, oh, check out this recording I did with Dad at the Sydney Opera House. I'm like, what? Like I didn't know about all that stuff. So all of a sudden I'm learning all this stuff from those guys. But then I think there would have been three or four teachers that were really instrumental while I was at Berklee. And probably the first one I can think of is Prince Charles Alexander. And so he was a music production and engineering teacher. I think he has 3 Grammys, maybe more, or around there. But he's worked with Puff Daddy and all these amazing. So he's in like kind of the hip hop world, hip hop R&B world, and just learning so much from him it just opened my eyes to how to be a professional and how to be adaptable to your client, like who you're working with. That was amazing. I learned so much from him. Another teacher that I learned a lot from was Tomo Fujita, who's actually from the same hometown as us, like Kyoto, so Kyoto, Japan. And he was one of the main teachers that John Mayer studied with. So it was really interesting to study with Tomo, because we had this thing in common with blues music, but also Kyoto. And so I learned a lot from him. And I think a lot of my guitar playing is definitely influenced by Tomo's teaching, some amazing, very simple lessons, but that really helped me unlock some stuff that I wanted to really pursue as a guitarist. And then I could keep going, but I'll just do one more. One other teacher was Livingston Taylor, and so that's he taught a performance class, and he is part of the Taylor family, which is James Taylor and I forget all the other brothers and sisters, but very big folk family. And Livingston is just a performer who could captivate you. And he would tell us stories of being on Madison, like at Madison Square Garden, opening for something like Steely Dan or something like this, and getting bottles thrown at him and booed like off of Madison Square Garden. And you're like, wow. And he's like, and I survived it. So that gave me so many insights into what it was to be an actual like performing musician. And he was such a generous performer. Like that's one of the things I learned. And he was like, one of the biggest lessons I learned from him was, it's not about you, it's about the audience. You're there to serve and provide for the audience. So if you're feeling nervous, that's actually a selfish feeling. Like it's actually not about you, it's about the audience. So those are some of the key role models, I'd say, in my time at Berklee that really shaped who I am now as a musician and my approach to music and songwriting and being a professional.
Oh, okay. So it sounds like it really helped you network, and you're very resourceful.
Yeah.
So are those people. Wow. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your songwriting process. And I think probably what everyone would like to ask you is, what comes first? Do you start with harmony? Do you start with the melody, the lyrics? Tell us about your process.